The weather was so chilly that Peter, John, Michael, and the Lost Boys of Never Never Land all caught terrible colds. The frost crept across the windows like a silver web, and the wind howled outside their cozy underground home. Even the trees above their hideout bent and groaned under the weight of icicles, and the stars in the sky seemed to shiver in their places. Wendy Darling was very busy being a little mother to them all. She flitted about the underground house, dosing them with spoonfuls of honey and lemon for their sore throats, wrapping them up in warm blankets, and making steaming bowls of soup to soothe their coughs. "Oh dear," she sighed, rubbing her hands together after tucking Toodles into his hammock. "I do wish our doggy nursemaid, Nana, were here. I am rushed off my feet, and Tinker Bell is no help at all." Tinker Bell, who was curled up in a little walnut shell bed near the fireplace, gave a sharp, indignant jingle. She had caught a cold herself and was sneezing tiny golden sparks. Even the usual mischievous twinkle in her eyes was dimmed by her sniffles. For days, the boys sniffled, sneezed, and coughed. Peter Pan, who was normally full of energy, lay sulking in his hammock, his arms crossed as he listened to the wind wail through the hollow trees. He hated being sick. It reminded him of being ordinary, and Peter Pan was anything but ordinary. At last, one morning, the colds disappeared like magic, and the boys were eager to be out in the fresh air again. "We're as fit as fiddles now," declared John, pushing up his spectacles. "We'll go skating on the frozen lagoon," chirped Michael, jumping up and down in excitement. But Wendy, ever sensible, shook her head sternly. "No, it is much too cold. You must keep indoors for the next 3 days." The boys groaned loudly. 3 days felt like an eternity when there were pirate ships to raid, mermaids to visit, and adventures to be had. "But Wendy," Peter protested, swinging out of his hammock, "we've been inside for ages. If we don't get out soon, we'll turn into mushrooms." Wendy crossed her arms. "You will do as I say, Peter Pan." Peter frowned, ready to argue further, but the moment Wendy fixed him with her motherly stare, he sighed in defeat and flopped back onto his hammock. "Quiet," he cried sharply when the other boys began grumbling. "You will do what Wendy tells you." Still, the Lost Boys sulked. They had already played every game they could think of dueling with wooden swords, drawing maps of Neverland in the dirt, telling stories about the time they had captured Captain Hook's hat. Even Slightly, who was usually the most imaginative of them all, had run out of ideas. Wendy, noticing their long faces, tapped her chin thoughtfully. Then she suddenly brightened. "I know," she said with a smile. "We will play a game called Hunt the Thimble." The Lost Boys perked up. "Hunt the Thimble," they repeated in confusion. "It's a wonderful game," Wendy explained. "I will hide a thimble somewhere in the room, and you must find it." The boys looked at each other. It didn't sound as exciting as fighting pirates or outwitting the cunning Captain Hook, but at least it was something new. Peter sat up, intrigued. "A thimble, like the one you gave me before." Wendy blushed slightly. "Yes, Peter," she said, remembering the time she had given him a thimble, which was actually a kiss. But this is my real sewing thimble, the one I use to mend your clothes and darn your socks. Peter wrinkled his nose. I don't wear socks. John pushed up his spectacles again. It does sound rather like a childish game, he admitted. But it will be fun, Wendy assured them. Just you wait and see. So the boys all agreed, and Wendy clapped her hands. Now everyone must leave the room while I hide the thimble. They scrambled out, pressing their ears to the door in excitement. As soon as they were gone, Wendy looked around thoughtfully. Where should she hide the thimble? Under the soup pot. Inside Peter's hammock, behind the clock. At last, she smiled to herself. She had thought of the perfect place. All right, she called, come in and start hunting. The boys burst into the room like a pack of puppies, their eyes darting around as they began their search. Toodles immediately dove under the table, poking through the baskets of food. Curly overturned a pile of blankets. Nibs climbed onto a chair and looked on the shelves. Even Peter, who at first had claimed the game sounded boring, was now crawling under the hammocks, checking every nook and cranny. Every now and then, Wendy would call out clues. Cold, she'd say if they were far from the thimble's hiding place. Very chilly. BRRR, icy? The boys shivered dramatically and moved in a different direction. Then, when slightly came near the fireplace, Winnie called, warm. When Nibs looked behind the curtains, she said, hot. And when Michael nearly knocked over the honey jar, she cried, burning. But still, no one found the thimble. After nearly an hour of searching, the boys sat back, panting, we give up. Toodles groaned, it's impossible. Curly agreed. Peter folded his arms, looking frustrated. He hated losing. Wendy only smiled. She held up her hand and wiggled her third finger. There, shining in the firelight, was the thimble. The boys stared. It was in sight all the time. Gasped John, and we didn't think to look there, cried Nibs. Peter suddenly threw back his head and crowed, cock-a-doodle-doo. The boys laughed and cheered, clapping their hands. It was such an easy place. Wendy giggled that no one thought to look there. That was a brilliant trick. Slightly admitted, let's play again, Michael begged. And so they did, again and again, until they were all breathless from laughing. Outside, the cold wind still howled and frost still covered the trees. But inside the underground home, the fire was warm, the laughter was loud, and the hearts of the children were full. For in Neverland, every moment, whether filled with battles against pirates or games as simple as Hunt the Thimble, was an adventure worth having.